a lot of things in terms of just communication and all sorts of amazing things. And frankly, if you want more, you're going to have to get the book. And his book is called Simply Put, Why Clear Messages Win and How to Design Them. Awesome book. I've really enjoyed reading it myself. And I'm going to switch gears on us a little bit here for this last segment, because one of the reasons we invited Ben onto the show is that Ben actually built up and then eventually sold his marketing agency. And so, Ben, let me kind of set the stage of what we see here as exit planners. We have all of these stats that say things like this. For instance, if 8 people exit their business over the next 2 years, 7 of them personally experience profound regret. So there's that. That implies a lot of things. On the other hand, we find that privately owned business owners typically have 80% or more of their personal wealth tied up in their business. So that's interesting. We also find that if you had 40 people in the room and you asked them to all raise their hand and say, who wants to exit their business in 2 years? And they all raised their hand. And I came back 2 years later and said, who's happy? There would be one person left who would raise his hand and say, I'm happy. And so given all of these things, we know that that's kind of the marketplace out there. Tell us a little bit about your journey. You grew a marketing agency, you built it up, and then you eventually exited. Just how did it all go down?
Oh yeah, those are some good statistics. I might steal them for some conversations I've been having. So I ran a marketing agency for 10 years. I started it more or less right out of college, and it was in an old professor's basement. I drove my '94 Honda Accord, up to their office every day, and it was great. I loved the process. I worked with some of my best friends, and we started with like local ice cream shop and camera shop, and eventually worked up to the NFL, Isle of New York, and Comcast, and these are the great companies that we got a chance to work with. And awesome. Along the way, you hired employees, and you got a bigger office, and all these different pieces. But then we wake up one day after 10 years, and the question is basically, do you want to do this for the next 10 years? And there wasn't like a gun to our head or anything. All of our clients were happy. We had a great team. We all got along. Most profitable year ever right before we sold. But it was something, because we were young and at the beginning of our careers when we started this, especially, we wanted to explore different things.
Sure.
But as part of that, it was important for us to find an exit that had a home for every client and a job for every employee. That was kind of our guiding piece of this. We wanted to obviously, get a paycheck as well as part of this, but we wanted to kind of do it with as much dignity as possible, because we know how disruptive it can be.
So how did you, when you started thinking through that, so once you went through, if you will, the exit seizure and decided we were going to make a change, you started thinking through really a stakeholder approach. We want to make sure that we, the owners, are taken care of, but we also want to make sure that the client is taken care of. We want to make sure all the employees are going. How did you start going through, I guess, educating and understanding your options and then vetting those options?
Well, we were in a unique circumstance because as a couple of young guys running a marketing agency, we often encountered the future version of us, if that makes sense. The people who they were in their 50s or 60s who had been running a marketing agency for 20 or 30 years, who were maybe looking and saying, hey, I don't want to do this forever. And I look around at my team, maybe I have 50 employees here, but none of them are necessarily like the next CEO, right? And so they look at us, maybe we partnered on a project at some point, and they said, hey, maybe these are the guys that could run that company. And so we were in a fortunate circumstance where that type of opportunity came knocking on our door like 3 or 4 times over the 10 years that we were there. And we would always explore it, and we have the conversation. So it wasn't like a totally brand new conversation a little bit for having this. Mm-hmm. But it was something that when we decided we wanted to kind of begin more seriously having those type of conversations, we did hire a broker. And that was invaluable. He earned his pay as part of that, because you do a lot of logistics with packaging up the financials, all this stuff. But also he, having had experience doing similar types of acquisitions in the past,
Right.
was able to guide us with, what are the questions, what's important to us, and how can we address all of them.
So a couple of things I heard there was, first of all, and I think it's important for our listeners, in any business, if you have competitors that are sort of sniffing around and knocking on your door and, acting like they might want to someday make an offer for you, you're probably doing something right. And so that's just a general, we've seen that a lot of times. That's a very good sign. Let's put it that way. But then I thought it was interesting. You looked around internally. We don't have we don't have a successor, essentially, right? The next leader is not on our bench, but they might be nearby in industry. But ultimately, then you did go through a process. How long did the process go to prepare the business for sale before you actually put it out to market?
Well, we began doing it right as COVID was hitting, so that completely screwed everything up, right? So we were getting close to
no stock ticker timing.
No, not quite, right?
For you guys. No, I'm just joking.
So we ended up we started the process around then. We had
Okay.
some initial traction. Ended up putting it on ice for a while, and then a year or so later we picked it back up. It did take a while. What we learned during that pause, though, from the first time we went out to the market, and then before we went out a second time, was we actually had a type of business that was not great for an acquisition because we were a full service digital marketing agency. We did branding and social media and advertising on one hand. And then we also did digital agency stuff like websites, mobile apps, kiosks on the other. Okay. What we often found was that people were interested in one or the other, at least at that moment in that marketplace. Companies were saying, I really need like a social media team. And they wanted to kind of get a plug and play one. Or they're like, I really need to get more clients in the web and mobile space. I need somebody who's an expert in that. But it was hard for them to find a home for both halves of that business. That was the interesting learning. So what we did during that interim before we went back out was we actually did a little bit of an internal reorg, and we wrote up separate P&Ls to sell those two as separate offerings.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to experience. A lot of times the companies we work with, it's not uncommon that it's a 3 to 5 year process because there's a lot of those types of there's always something out there where and I don't know if you went through a process where they were actually tracking your transferable value metric along the way. But a lot of times what we'll find is, if you soft test something to the market and go out there and, there's a lot of different ways we can come at that number. You do find that, we need to make strategic structural changes to this business and then prove the value of that over a period of time before we actually take this business to market. And so, since you've been through it, I think you can understand why that might be a half a decade if you're doing this sometimes. And so you were in an accelerated situation. Take us through the rest of actually getting it back out to market once you reorged, and then what happened?
Yeah, once we reorged, it felt like it was a much more logical acquisition for a number of different buyers, and then it moved actually relatively quickly. We found a home for one piece with a private equity firm that was rolling up a few small agencies into their own in-house agency. And then we found a home for the other half with an agency on another part of the country who wanted to kind of get a foothold in our market, right? So it ended up being a really good strategic fit for both sides of it. And as mentioned before, everybody had a job and everybody had, every client had a home. That was important. But what's nice about it too is I was able to you sort of sneak out in the middle, if that makes sense. I had to do some consulting and transitional work for sure, but I wasn't beholden to like a 2-year, 3-year earnout that I know a lot of people in my shoes end up having to do. And everybody I know that's done that kind of hates it, to be honest. You change your entire life, right? You go from being an owner to being an employee, and the money that you thought you were going to have because you sold the business is really all tied up in these metrics that you don't really have any control over anymore. Everybody I've known that's gone through that has said that's one of the most painful parts of their career has been that period. And I'm very fortunate that I was able to avoid, for the most part, having to be kind of shackled down like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, big props to you and in being able to pull that off, because that we hear shades of that story all day long, and it's really, get out is, once you know you're trying to get out, do it the right way, of course, and the right way for everybody, including yourself, who's created all this value. Um, so how has your life changed now that you're on the other side of this? I mean, because we see everything under the sun, from people, just embracing this new life, and it's like a new second wind, all the way to people freaking out and having existential crises, and like we're worried about them. We have this whole range of outcomes. And so I'm hoping you're not on the second one, but real talk, like how has that gone as a human being?
Yeah, I don't regret it at all. I had a great ride. I still hang out with on a pretty regular basis a lot of the folks that I worked with. Even
Nice.
some former clients have become like friends. My wife and I will have dinner with them. So I'm grateful for that. There are days where I miss working with everybody. There are days where I miss kind of having our office and going into that, for sure.
Mhm.
That's 100%
Yeah.
the case. But I'm enjoying right now having this kind of freedom to work on a bunch of different things. I have a
Yeah.
number of consulting projects that I've been working on with some really great clients. I have the book, obviously, which, unless if I didn't have the space over the past year and a half to write this
Right.
book, it wouldn't have happened, right?
Yeah.
And I also have done, I still teach. I still, I'm on a number of boards. And so I'm enjoying this kind of portfolio life at the
That's
moment.
awesome.
Uh,
That's
at some
awesome.
point, I'll dive back into something kind of head first, but
Yep.
right now it's still in this kind of long-term kind of decompression a little bit from the 10
Well,
years there, and it's great to explore all this new stuff.
congratulations. You got about 20 seconds left. Any parting words for somebody who's thinking about going through the exit journey?
I would just say, if it's a service-based business, you have to be prepared for it to no longer be your stuff. Because the service-based
Yep.
business, an agency like ours, it's the magic trick. And so you're doing the magic trick every day when you go in. As soon as you stop performing it, it's no longer there. That type of business is a verb, less more so than it is a noun.
Awesome.
So you have to be okay with no longer being able to do that in order to really take the
Awesome.
most out of it.
Ben, I got to cut you off. Thanks for being here. You've listened to the Xtology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Potential show.